ceasefire. It's a significant webinar since we address really eminent issue now on the ground, and we have some key points for today. Just to remind you, the key points for today as topics. First, we have UN's role in initiating an international conference for Gaza relief and reconstruction. Second, the European Union's responsibility, given its support for Israel's actions and its potential role in facilitating reconstruction efforts. Three, the silence of Arab governments and their failure to take meaningful action. Five, the stance of Islamic nations and their response to the massacre and humanitarian crisis. And last, we need to safeguard the ceasefire agreement against Israel violations and manipulations. And let me quickly introduce our speakers for today. We have Mr. Said Ibrahim, Chairman, Malaysian Parliament Caucus for Palestine, Maria Del Mar Lorenio Narpona, Senior Advisor, ARDD, Mr. Michael Link, former UN Special Rapporteur on Palestine, Mr. Nihad Awad, National Executive Director of CARE, Ambassador Masoud Malouf, former Lebanese diplomat, Dr. Mandy Turner, Senior Researcher, Security in Context, and lastly, Mr. Eric Warsaw, US social media influencer. Allow me to just quickly explain the presentation format of today's webinar. Each speaker will have 4 to 5 minutes to present his testimony and insights. And after all speakers have finished their presentations, if time permits, we will have a discussion session lasting no more than 20 minutes. During this session, speakers can add their thoughts and comments on other speakers' contributions. And at the end, each speaker will have 1 minute to provide their final words and conclusion messages. And let's start, and thank you very much for listening, and let's welcome to the floor first speaker of today, Mr. Said Ibrahim, Chairman, Malaysian Parliament Caucus for Palestine. Mr. Said, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Brother Nadir.
Welcome.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi
Alaikum
wabarakatuh. And greetings, everybody, fellow panelists and viewers. I would like to thank for the opportunity given for me to speak again in the Arab Organization for Human Rights in UK. And I think this is a very important subject that we are discussing. It is the current situation, the geopolitical situation in Palestine. And I will speak about the importance of the continuation of the ceasefire and the agreement, and as well as the Gaza relief and reconstruction. However, I think I must also address a bit on Trump's remarks on Gaza. I think perhaps everybody else will also say something about that. So what did he say? What were Trump's remarks? Initially, he said that the US will take over the Gaza Strip and will do a job with it too. And we will own it and blah, 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 blah. So I think that's the remarks that he has given. And he also said that it will become a home to the world's people. And he likened it to the Riviera of the Middle East. Or maybe he was also referring to his own style, Mar-a-Lago. But most recently, he said that his proposal for mass displacement in Gaza does not include a right of return for Palestinians in the enclave. And adding that, at the same time, he adds as well that Egypt and Jordan would take in the Palestinians as US gives Egypt and Jordan billions of dollars a year. So what were opinions about the remarks? There were widespread condemnation. It was inflammatory, outlandish, shameful, outrageous, land grab, most foolish idea, beyond any rational thinking or any kind of policy feasibility, and simply nuts and crazy. But I think it is not something which is shocking coming out from Trump. There were also other opinions about this. Remarks were saying that senior Hamas official condemned Trump's calls for Gazans to leave as expulsion from their land. And we consider them a recipe for generating chaos and tension in the region because the people of Gaza will not allow such plans to pass. Removing all Palestinians from Gaza is tantamount to destroying them as a people. Gaza is their home. Gaza's death and destruction is a result of the government of Israel killing civilians by thousands, often with US bombs. And I think a lot of people have been saying this as well, that it is a simply ethnic cleansing by another name. And it also constitute a crime against humanity. So what I would say is that this is something which I don't think is shocking because of two factors. Number one is because Israel's plan was from the beginning forced displacement, annexation, bombardment, genocide, ethnic cleansing, settler colonialism. So that is something which is already there. And secondly, the factor of this is part of Netanyahu's Gaza 2035 vision. You probably are aware about this vision of taking over and having the crisis to prosperity, from crisis to prosperity, plan for transformation of Gaza Strip. And this was a document reportedly released by Netanyahu's office in May of 2024. And the plans outline a four-step plan that begins with dismantling Hamas, followed by a period of humanitarian aid, rebuilding, and finally self-governance. And in the rebuild phase, the plan mentions the removal of rubble, followed by the building of modern cities from scratch, devoid of social, ecological, and any historical accountability. So Trump's remarks, I think, were not shocking because this is aligned with these two factors. But it was shocking only because of the manner that he raised it and spoken alongside with the occupier, the aggressor, and the criminal of humanity, Netanyahu, right by his side. And that to me is shocking. It is a kind of real estate developer, capitalist, and business-minded construct, or at worst, imperialism at its work. So, viewers, ladies and gentlemen, I think that's my take on what Trump's remarks were. But coming back to relief and reconstruction and the importance of continuation of the ceasefire and the agreement, I remember a statement given out by our Prime Minister, Malaysia's Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim, on 16th of January, which he said, upon announcement of the ceasefire agreement, he said, the critical step provides much needed relief for the people of Gaza who have endured such immense suffering. The international community must ensure that it is upheld, paving the way for talks on subsequent phases that will lead to sustainable calm and the reconstruction of Gaza. And he then talks about the partnership with Japan for early collaboration on the reconstruction of Gaza. And he was referring to the East Asia Reconstruction Plan for Gaza or Palestine under what's called a CPAD, where there is a cooperation among East Asian countries to develop or redevelop Palestine. So, and there is an opportunity now to set up a fund to ensure that that would be a reconstruction for Gaza. And yesterday, together with Erdogan was here in Malaysia. He was in, I think today in Indonesia. And together with Erdogan, our Prime Minister further mentioned that ASEAN, with Malaysia as the chair, has taken a firm position in support of a long-lasting ceasefire, with Malaysia pledging utmost support to the territory's reconstruction efforts. So what I'm saying is actually there are efforts, there are thinking about how we would be able to actually reconstruct Gaza. But let's also understand what sort of reconstruction are we talking about. Israeli air attacks have left more than 42 million tons. This was in August. I think as of now, it's probably 50 million tons of debris or rubble across the strait. And that's enough rubble to fill a line of dump trucks stretching from New York to Singapore. So I don't know how much that is, but it's tremendous. And removing it all will take many, many years. It will probably cost about maybe billions. And Erdogan put it at about $100 billion and called for Israel to bear the cost. So removing the task will be very complicated because there will be unexploded bombs, there will be dangerous contaminants, and human remains under the rubble. So there are other complexities as well, such as disposal sites, property rights, hidden expenses. The question is, who's going to pay for this? Who's going to fund for this? Rebuilding Gaza and the lives of its residents will require a complete overhaul of its entire physical infrastructure and some form of political solution over what a new Gaza will look like. But before any of that can happen, relief and humanitarian aid, the collection and disposal of the rubble, the ceasefire must go on. And is of paramount importance. So, ladies and gentlemen, viewers, my hope is for the following. Number one, that ceasefire must continue according to the agreement. Number two, relief and reconstruction must not be under any particular country's agenda or plans, must be under the supervision and auspices of UN with clear principles of rights, ownership, and governance. Number three, reconstruction coordinated without prejudice, forced displacement, or real estate agenda, but with involvement and empowerment to the people of Palestine. And in fact, it should also go hand in hand with efforts to establish an independent Palestine. Number four, relief and humanitarian aid must be provided, not used as a bargaining chip to coerce Palestinians in leaving Gaza. Number five, rules of law must be honored, i.e., compliance with international laws. Therefore, United Nations, ICJ, and ICC must be respected and empowered to execute and enforce the law. And lastly, those who are against will be exposed and must be isolated, in fact, sanctioned and be held accountable. I understand that there have been talks about reconstruction of Gaza since last year. However, I agree, based on my hopes above, that there is an urgent need to call on the UN Secretary General to convene an international conference on Gaza relief and reconstruction. And I do hope that the Arab states will come up with their own plans, as mentioned by King Jordan today or yesterday, that the Arab states will come up with their own plan of reconstruction for Gaza. So thank you again for the opportunity. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ibrahim, for your contribution and input. And now we move and give the floor to Maria Del Mar Lourinho Narbona, the Senior Advisor to ARDD. Maria, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Nadira. Thank you for inviting me to this distinguished forum. Today I want to highlight two key principles that speak to the nature of the reconstruction, as Mr. Ibrahim has been talking about, and I'm happy to hear his words, and that our organization believes must be at the heart of Gaza's reconstruction. First, it needs to be, as it has been mentioned, a UN-led process with coordinated support from the international community and with UNRWA playing a central role. And it also needs to fully integrate local expertise and knowledge to ensure an effective and sustainable recovery. Before I move to the 2 points, let's just remember the scale of destruction. Mr. Ibrahim has mentioned the rubble, the debris that it's right now in Gaza. But let's not forget that as of the most recent UN assessment of January 30th, 47,354 persons have been killed. That means 1 every 50 people in Gaza has lost their life. Over 100,000 people have been injured, with many suffering life-altering wounds. 90% of Gaza's population is internally displaced, and many have been forced to move multiple times. The humanitarian crisis is severe, with restricted access to food and water as we speak. Adding to this humanitarian crisis, we have a major infrastructure assessment, damage assessment that is estimated to reach 29.9 billion, with residential buildings bearing the brunt of that damage. Gaza's economy has collapsed, and the majority of Palestinians in Gaza suffer from what we know as multidimensional poverty, meaning they lack access to basic services like healthcare, education, employment, housing, and personal safety. So as a civil society organization, the Arab Renaissance for Democracy and Development advocates for a UN-led reconstruction that integrates local knowledge and experience to ensure sustainable and effective recovery in Gaza. In the latest statement, the UN has set 2 priorities that have been previously mentioned as well. Number 1, protecting civilians and ensuring respect for international humanitarian law. Number 2, guaranteeing safe and unrestricted access for humanitarian aid. These two priorities are fundamental pillars without which reconstruction cannot move forward effectively. And as we know, it is of difficult implementation as of today. The UN has also established key priorities for rebuilding: clearing debris and hazardous waste, as mentioned before, restoring essential services, healthcare, education, water, sanitation, hygiene, electricity, providing emergency housing, which it's critical, revitalizing the private sector, and creating opportunities for sustainable livelihoods. In this UN-led reconstruction process, we believe UNRWA remains a critical player in delivering humanitarian aid and rebuilding the infrastructure in Gaza. UNRWA has the largest local workforce in Gaza, most of whom are Palestinians. It's the most experienced humanitarian organization with over 70 years of experience, and it has managed the largest infrastructure in Gaza: schools, healthcare facilities, social service centers, serving the Gaza population over decades. And as a result, it is prepared to scale up recovery programs, ensuring that it reaches aid to those that need it. And the final point I want to make is our call for local knowledge for this reconstruction process. Past wars and conflicts in Gaza have shown that local professionals and institutions play a critical role in rebuilding. If we look at aggressions, at the aftermath of aggression Operation Cast-Lead in 2008-2009, local engineers and construction workers led clearing debris and rebuilding homes, schools, and medical facilities despite material shortages. After the aggression of Operation Pillar of Defense 2012, Palestinian Contractor Union worked with local professionals and international donors to assess damage and prioritize reconstruction efforts. After aggression of Operation Protective Edge 2014, university-led research in Gaza developed sustainable construction materials such as recycled rubble to overcome shortages. There are no universities left in Gaza, but students are there and professionals, those who remained as well, and those who are in the diaspora, and those who are in the region. After the aggression, and just to conclude, after the aggression of Operation Guardian of the Walls 2021, local humanitarian organizations such as the Palestinian Red Crescent Society mobilized emergency aid, were critically mobilized in emergency aid, etc., and infrastructure recovery. So the lesson learned is that, again, local experts, engineers, organizations, etc., can help. In Jordan, in late October 2023, Jordanian engineers volunteered to organize already reconstruction efforts. Of course, this was at the very beginning of this aggression, and it didn't move forward for the reasons that we all know. So, to this end, in order to facilitate this type of local inclusion of local expertise, is in discussions. Our organization is in discussions on developing a repository of expert network and locally driven reconstruction efforts. We are aimed to connect local and regional experts with direct experience in Gaza. We aim to serve as a knowledge hub for technical and cultural and policy expertise. And we aim to ensure that planning and implementation are going to be inclusive of local actors, not just by external frameworks. So rebuilding Gaza is about more than reconstructing buildings. It is about restoring lives and dignity. Reconstruction thus must include local experts, institutions, regional professionals. The success of past reconstruction shows now the situation is completely different, is unprecedented, what we are experiencing. But still, there is a space, and there must be a space for locally led reconstruction as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Maria, for this informative numbers and situation in Gaza regarding the development and reconstruction. And now we move to Professor Michael Lake, former UN Special Rapporteur on Palestine. Michael, you have the floor.
Thank you very much for that, Mother. My grateful thanks to the Arab Organization for Human Rights for its invitation for me to join this distinguished panel to talk about the burning issue of the moment, which is the future of Palestine and the future in particular of Gaza. This is one of the most combustible political and legal issues in the world today. After 16 months of total war, Gaza has been flattened, and it resembles Dresden, Berlin, or Tokyo at the end of the Second World War. It is full of rubble, It is full of unexploded bombs and hazardous munitions waste. And most importantly, there are 2.2 million Palestinians living there without housing, without access to quality health care, without schools, without universities, without jobs, and without easy access to food or water or sanitation. This devastation, we must remember, has not been the result of a natural event, such as an earthquake or a tsunami. This is entirely a human catastrophe, a genocide, something that we outlawed in international law more than 75 years ago as the crime of crimes. The issue that we are addressing today is the rebuilding of Gaza and the responsibility of the United Nations and the global North. In my brief remarks today, I'm going to speak about international law and the United Nations in two ways: what must be prevented and what must it push for. So first, what international law and the UN must work hard to prevent is the forced displacement or ethnic cleansing of Gaza. Let's keep in mind that the Trump and Netanyahu threat to empty Gaza of the Palestinians and to enable Israeli annexation of the Strip is profoundly illegal on three related counts. First of all, this ethnic cleansing would amount to, in law, the forced displacement, which is a serious violation of the Geneva Conventions of 1949, and both Israel and the United States, as every other country in the world, have signed onto the Geneva Conventions. Second, forced displacement is listed as both a war crime and a crime against humanity under the 1998 Rome Statute, which created the International Criminal Court. Now, neither Israel nor the United States have signed on to the ICC and the Rome Statute, but the International Criminal Court has ruled that the Rome Statute does apply to the occupied Palestinian territory, East Jerusalem, the West Bank, and Gaza, and therefore both Israeli and American political leaders could be criminally liable for initiating a forced displacement. And third, the UN Security Council adopted a ceasefire resolution in June of 2024, Resolution 2735. This resolution was initiated by the United States, and the US said during the debates at the Security Council that Israel supported the resolution. The Security Council resolution specifically condemned any forced displacement of Palestinians in Gaza. The resolution read, and I quote, that the Security Council rejects any attempt at demographic or territorial change in the Gaza Strip. Look, there we have it. Forced displacement is a serious breach of international law, and no amount of disguising it as a humanitarian gesture alters that fact. It violates international law precisely because it creates great human suffering and ignites political instability and territorial conquest, all leading to more wars and infinite conflict. My second point goes to what the United Nations and international law should be pushing for with respect to Gaza and the Palestinians. And the answer is simple: Palestinian self-determination. The right of the Palestinians to self-determination is embodied in countless UN resolutions and has been embedded into international law by the advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice from last July, which said, and I'm quoting here, that, quote, by virtue of the right to self-determination, a people is protected against acts aimed at dispersing the population and undermining its integrity as a people. The court also said, and I'm quoting, a key element of the right of self-determination is the right of a people freely to determine its political status and to pursue its economic, social, and cultural development. And thirdly, the International Court of Justice said that the dependence of the West Bank, East Jerusalem, especially the Gaza Strip, on Israel for the provision of basic goods and services impairs the enjoyment of fundamental human rights, in particular, the right of self-determination. So, central to any discussion of the future of Gaza that this conversation revolves first and foremost around the Palestinian people themselves. Nothing about them without them. The reconstruction of Gaza, how Gaza will be governed, how Gaza's security will be protected, how it will be connected geographically, politically, and legally to the rest of Palestine will be for the Palestinians themselves to determine within the broad space that the right to self-determination protects. International law and UN resolutions on Palestine provides the way forward. Only a rights-based approach to imagining the future of Israeli Jews and Palestinian Arabs living together in the land between the river and the sea will lead us to a place of justice, prosperity, and peace. And my final point, let me offer a provocative issue. Why can't the Palestinians, if the Palestinians are going to have to be displaced only temporarily from Gaza while the reconstruction of Gaza begins, why not allow them, and particularly the 2/3 of the Palestinians in Gaza who are the refugees of 1948 or the descendants of refugees from 1948, return to their homes and their properties in what is now Israel? Resolution 194, adopted by the United Nations in December 1948, provided the Palestinian refugees with the right to return. Resolution 194 has been reaffirmed virtually every year since by the General Assembly. It is the most reaffirmed resolution in the history of the United Nations General Assembly. No one in the global north is putting Israel as a destination where Palestinians might relocate either temporarily or permanently. Why not allow them to have the choice as guaranteed by international law and Resolution 194? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Michael. And I also agree about this proposal. And now, Dr. Mandy Turner, is your turn. May you have the floor, Dr. Mandy? Senior Researcher Security in Context. Go ahead.
Thank you for the invitation to speak on this panel. The first three speakers have talked about the rights-based approach to reconstruction and the centrality of the UN in this process. And I was going to speak about what kind of post-conflict reconstruction plans and post-governance plans we've seen mushroom over the past year. Barely a month goes by, but there is another one launched. And they're all very, very similar in that they deny and block the right of Palestinians to self-determination and sovereignty. And that's the most important thing that we need to emphasize. But I think that the events of the last few days means that we've gone beyond this. And I don't want to replicate what others have said. So I'm going to focus my comments on two main issues. The first is that we need to be direct in our analysis and strategy. We cannot go back to a situation of business as usual. This is a crossroads. We're now in a new era. What the wider world does now is crucial for peace and justice between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea and for the wider Middle East. We've all watched how over the past 3 to 4 days, President Donald Trump has announced the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians from Gaza and that the United States will take over the Gaza Strip. And Saeed talked about this extensively. We've also seen how Trump has told Jordan and Egypt that they must take in Palestinians from Gaza. And we know that he's going to try to force this to happen. We all know that this is a violation of international law. It's a violation of the UN Charter, and it's a violation of the rights of Palestinians. Now, Israel's war in Gaza forced a series of huge shifts. We've seen a collapse of past assumptions, particularly the viability of a two-state solution, and the past 30 years of the type of non-sovereign Palestinian self-governance that was created by the Oslo Accords. It's clear to Palestinians and their allies a very long time ago that Israel was never going to allow a sovereign Palestinian state to emerge. But that's another topic for another discussion. Previous speakers have also mentioned this. But now it's explicit that Israel will not allow Palestinian self-determination. And this is a violation of the right of Palestinians and a violation of natural justice. But this is not just about the Gaza Strip being destroyed. It's not just about 50,000 Palestinians brutally killed and many, many more buried still under the rubble. This is also about the West Bank, including East Jerusalem. Over the past week or so, we've seen 40,000 Palestinians being displaced from their homes in the West Bank through military violence by Israel and by the violence of Israeli settlers. And today, we saw Israeli settlers storm Al-Aqsa compound in the Old City. So to pretend or just to focus on Gaza is not the right way to do this. We cannot just talk about relief and reconstruction while this is going on. The only future Israel is offering to Palestinians is to continue to live under its apartheid rule without rights, and this is unacceptable. If the UN and its member states do not stand up against this and against Donald Trump's plans for Gaza, then they are showing not only that they're morally bankrupt, but that they do not care about people in the Middle East. Furthermore, young people in the West will see that democratic protest is not enough to change their state's policies. What kind of message is this sending? Now, I'm under no illusions that Western states, and particularly the EU, are willing to do what I'm about to say, but I'm going to say it anyway, because we need to make demands on our elites. And because part of this discussion is about the responsibility of Western states and the role of the UN. So the second point I want to make is that all states should join the Hague Group, which was formed just under 2 weeks ago. Now, this is significant because, of course, creating it in The Hague is that this is a seat of the UN's Court of Justice and the place where the laws of war were created. On the 31st of January, 9 countries formed the Hague Group, dedicated to coordinating legal, economic and diplomatic measures against Israel to make it comply with international law and UN resolutions. Now, these 9 countries are Belize, Bolivia, Cuba, Colombia, Honduras, Malaysia, Namibia, Senegal, and South Africa. Now, these 9 countries have formed this coalition and they need more powerful states to join them. If Western states, particularly in Europe, are serious about defending the UN Charter and supporting the rights of Palestinians to self-determination, they must join this initiative. All states must join it. Together, such a coalition could stand against Israel and the United States' plans for Palestine. Together, such a coalition could push the tide at the UN to stand up for the principles embedded in the UN Charter. The UN can only do what states push it to do and support it to do. Now, I'm not going to hold my breath that this will happen. I think it's more likely that civil society action around the Palestinian boycott, divestment and sanctions movement will grow and grow, but we need to make demands of our politicians. Talking about food trucks for Gaza and who will rule over Gaza is only one part of the wider issue of how to support Palestinian rights and defend their right to self-determination. So I would make the demand that, that states join the Hague Group. This is one route to support the UN in defending the right of Palestinians to self-determination. I'll leave it there now because it's time constraints. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mandy Turner, for your input. And now we give the floor to Ambassador Masoud Malouf, former Lebanese diplomat. Ambassador Malouf.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me for this.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, and a big hello to all the participants in this important meeting. I'm very happy, let me say that we are meeting now at a time when it is the most critical time for the Palestinian issue, when the United States and Israel are trying to eliminate Palestine from the map completely, at a time when Trump is trying to remove the more than 2 million Palestinians from Gaza and transfer it into what he calls a Riviera, which I don't know, I don't want to say anything about that. And at a time also when Netanyahu takes his liberty to attack the Palestinians in the West Bank in a very, very bad way, and increasing his attacks, the Israeli attacks on the Palestinians in the West Bank. And I think that was the price that Trump gave Netanyahu to accept the ceasefire on the eve of Trump getting into the White House. These are very important things, and the timing of this meeting today is very important to show the world that we do not believe in all these ideas here and there, that there is no Palestine and there is no two-state solution. And the idea of President Trump, when Trump was talking about removing the Palestinians from Gaza in the White House, of course, he has talked about it several times, but in the White House, when he was meeting with Netanyahu, standing on his right and talking about how difficult, how hard life is in Netanyahu, in Gaza, how destroyed the buildings and the houses and everything is in, as if it was an earthquake happened, while the person in charge, who was in charge and who was the cause of all that, was standing beside him. Of course, not a word about that. And after that, the speaker in the White House, the person in charge of speaking in the name of the White House, Caroline Levitt, was trying to turn down a little bit, make it a little bit easier on the people to understand. Said, no, we will not send the military people to Gaza, and the United States will not participate in the cost of the reconstruction of Gaza. And so that to hint here that the taxpayers will not have to pay money for Gaza, but the taxpayers had to pay a lot of money for Israel to send all the weapons and all the money to Israel, but no word about that, as if this is something that is important to do, but the reconstruction of Gaza, we don't have to pay money for that. And the important thing that happened after Trump gave this outlandish idea of moving the people out of Gaza was that not a single country outside Israel has supported the idea or has not criticized the idea, saying that it is something unacceptable, that is ethnic cleansing and all these things. So now talking about the reconstruction of Gaza is the most important thing that we can talk about, give a message to the world that people around the world are not accepting what Trump is trying to do. I think this is very important, and reconstruction of Gaza, it should be financed by Israel and by the United States in the first place, because they are the cause of all the destruction. So they should bear the price of the reconstruction. This is the law of the world. That's how things should happen. You destroy, you have to rebuild, you have to pay the price. I'm sure, of course, Arab countries will participate in that. This is the normal thing to do. But let me also mention one thing on the political level. When Trump gave his idea, and Jordan and Egypt did not accept the idea, the media here and the Trump and all the American responsible people in charge, and even in Israel, they said Jordan and Egypt refuse to accept the Palestinians, as if they don't want to make a favor, to do a favor to the Palestinians. The Palestinians are something horrible. We don't want them in our countries. While in fact, the idea was that Egypt and Jordan were against displacing the Palestinians, were against ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians from the Gaza Strip and from anywhere. So that's very different concept between what the media says here and the reality of the things. And another important development happened after that. Now President Sisi of Egypt, who was supposed to come to the United States soon, in the next few days, today has decided to not have any meeting with President Trump as long as the displacement of the Palestinians from Gaza is on the agenda of the meeting. So he refused to finish. He doesn't accept that. And on the 27th of this month, there will be a summit, Arab summit meeting, in which I am sure all the Arab countries will take a united front against the idea of President Trump. These are important developments. Now, as far as the reconstruction of is concerned, we have heard many ideas that came out, and I agree with everything that has been said. And I want to add that reconstruction of the buildings and everything else, the hospitals and the houses, is extremely important, but we have also to think about the reconstruction of the human beings, these children, the education who have lost already 1 year and a half of education, these people who are really traumatized by what they have seen every day. And we have seen that the Palestinian people are attached to their lands. They want to go back. They have moved north. But now, as we can see, even the ceasefire is in jeopardy, and Israel is already threatening to get back to the war. Netanyahu has one thing in his mind. He doesn't want to stop the war, because the end of the war means the end of his political life and maybe going to jail for corruption. So that's why what he wants is continue the war. But again, I conclude by saying that talking about the reconstruction of Gaza is a very important thing around the world, doing that in many, many places of the world. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Masoud Malouf, and for your also emotions towards what's happening in Gaza. And I just want to apologize to Mr. Eric Porso and Mr. Nahad Awad for waiting for us so long, or keeping them waiting for long. But actually, Mr. Said Ibrahim is in Malaysia, and now it's getting too late for him. Maybe it's 3 a.m. in the morning. So before he can leave, if he can just make kind of contribution or final word before he leaves, Dr. Syed, you have the floor.
Oh, thank you so much. So gracious of you to give me the opportunity, at least for the last few words. I think everybody has mentioned a lot. And to me, what's more important is what can we do to ensure that we would be able to have solidarity among the Arab countries, among the Western world, among the Southeast Asia countries as well, that we must be able to help to reconstruct Gaza, and not just in terms of physical, but also the emotional part as well. And I think this is very important aspect of all of it. But essential in all of this is that the Western powers, the United Nations must respect the rules of law that they establish themselves. If they do not respect the rules of law, then everything will collapse. And I think it's essential that we continue on to ensure that the ceasefire will continue. And we have to isolate America, United States, and also Israel in this case. So I leave you with that. Thank you so much again, and I hope you will enjoy the session till the end. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Said Ibrahim, for joining us, and we're sorry to keep you up that late. And now also we move to Eric Warsaw. He is a social media influencer, and also we apologize for keeping him waiting that long. Eric, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you
Yeah,
very
have
much. I
Lord.
appreciate you.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you for having me. Yes, to speak of this, you have to start with Donald Trump, I believe. Donald Trump is talking about deporting every single Palestinian out of Gaza, and in his own words, owning it for himself, taking it for himself, and rebuilding it for himself. He's talking about ceasefire. He's talking about peace, maintaining ceasefire, maintaining peace, while also talking about ethnic cleansing at the same time. These are two completely opposite concepts. You're fueling the fire while trying to calm it down. And to his credit, he stopped the genocide. He stopped the Holocaust. He said he was going to do it before he took office. That's an incredible boast, and he pulled it off. But now at the same time, too, he's undermining his own accomplishments. And right now, for this Saturday, they're seeing the freedom fighters, Hamas, the heroes, have decided to postpone the prisoner exchange, citing that Israel is violating ceasefire, that they are obstructing aid, and that, well, Donald Trump's rhetoric about deporting everybody while talking peace, and they're right for that. They're absolutely right for that, for postponing it. And now that Donald Trump said that the prisoner exchange should go forward or all hell will break loose, I'm quoting him. And Netanyahu has made a lot of threats too. And now we have a potential breakdown of that ceasefire this Saturday. As for moving all the Palestinians out of Gaza, it is absolutely ridiculous. Of course, they should take part in the rebuilding. Whoever funds it, Israel should fund it. Israel should fund the rebuilding, the reconstruction. They're the ones who destroyed it. They should fund it. But the Palestinians have a right to rebuild their own city, their own territory. They should rebuild it with their own hands and including their own culture and everything like that. And I really believe clearing them all out is in itself suspicious. Like, why not allow them? It's not just taking over the territory. It's not just an excuse for taking over the territory yourself. But I really believe that underneath all that rubble is evidence of all of Israel's war crimes. 1 year ago, last April, you guys remember when there was almost 400 people were found in a mass grave at a hospital in Gaza. Who knows how many other mass graves are there? Donald Trump is saying that there's about 1.8 million Palestinians left in Gaza right now. Before this Holocaust, there was 2.2 million. That's a deficit of 400,000. Of course, a lot of them migrated and escaped to Egypt during the time, but that's probably measured in the tens of thousands, not hundreds of thousands. And it's devastating. And there's a lot of things going on underneath the surface. They're trying to ethnically cleanse and keep that entire area for themselves. It is absolutely ridiculous. We talk about international law. We talk about the United Nations. And at the same time as we're talking about it, the international law and the United Nations is routinely ignored. Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu, America and Israel, are the prime movers in all this. And again, international law in the United Nations is routinely ignored. So talking about international law in the United Nations, we really have to make these things effective. We need effective international law. We need an effective United Nations. And how can we make these things effective? There's a lot of little ways. I really believe, first and foremost, I think we need to move the headquarters of the United Nations from America to a more neutral location. I do not think it's a coincidence that the area in which the United Nations is seated, it's inside of America, and it's America that is constantly abusing and ignoring the United Nations. I think the fact that the United Nations is inside of America, it gives it a locational advantage for influence, and that America is exerting more influence on the UN and bypassing the UN because it's located in America. I think we should possibly move the headquarters of the United Nations. We have international law, we have the United Nations, but again, they're routinely ignored. We have to do things to make international law in the United Nations more effective in their job. And that I think we really need a highlight on that. And again, I definitely appreciate you for having me. I wanted to keep it short. And again, thank you very much, guys. And we do have to preserve Palestine's right to self-determination. We have to keep them in their homeland, and they have the right to rebuild their own civilization. And those are my final words. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you very much. And now we move to Mr. Nahad Awad, National Executive Director of CARE. And Mr. Awad, we are very sorry to keep you waiting that long. And now you have the floor, Dr. Nahad.
No problem. Thank you, Nader. And I appreciate hearing from every speaker who has spoken so far. I learned so much about their political understanding, legal perspective, or institutional expertise towards rebuilding Gaza and putting things in context, which is the point that I will start with. By introduction, I am Nihad Awad. I am a Palestinian myself. I am a refugee. My family was forcibly displaced in 1948. Many of my family members ended up in Jordan, where I was born, in a refugee camp. Others ended up in other cities in Palestine, including Gaza. So, for the people of Gaza, the genocide and the looming threat of ethnic cleansing that has been green lighted by President Trump and has been the dream and a plan in the works by the State of Israel definitely evoke not only memories but also a stain on the face of the world community who not only has not prevented the genocide from starting in 2023, but has even failed to stop the genocide. So, what kind of UN or world community, I'm talking about governments, not people, I'll cover the people in a moment. What kind of world powers, including the UN, Western governments, have to say about their will, their moral clarity, standing in front of humanity vis-a-vis one country, the United States, and two presidents, the former President Biden, who declared himself as a Zionist and has put the interest, the assets, the reputation of the United States and its collective experience on the line in the service of a genocidal regime to maim, annihilate, and destroy civilization, inhabitants, and people and their culture and their lives. And a former and also a current president who on his own demonstrated that he had the power to put pressure outside him being even a president a few days before becoming a president and force the state of Israel and its leader to its knees and accept all the pressure exercised on it to stop the bombing, maiming, and destruction of Gaza. Moving to just less than a month in office and just green lighting again the resumption of the destruction, bombing, and ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians in Gaza. That shows that one country, one president, and their will can paralyze the world community and can just turn it obsolete, ineffective, and shamelessly incompetent. So where we are now, as we speak and or would like to speak on rebuilding of Gaza, which I believe this theme maybe was decided before the threat of President Trump to the Palestinian side that if hostages are not released by Saturday noon, the resumption of the genocide will continue. That is where we are. Not even not knowing the magnitude of destruction, the number of people who have been killed or have been maimed or the lost people under the rubble. Even Western media, international organizations have not had the chance to enter Gaza and assess the damage, let alone to see what kind of construction measures or projects are to take place. So I know that rebuilding of Gaza and reconstruction is the subject of today's discussion, but I think the bigger issue is not the reconstruction of Gaza, is really the protection of the ceasefire. That is the challenge before the world community, the Muslim world, the Arab League, and even the promise that President Biden cut on himself in front of Arab American and Muslim American voters who he himself acknowledged they put him in office when they voted for him in the state of Michigan. And he repeated this in his meeting with Jordan's King Abdullah yesterday in the White House. So all of this, I'm just painting this picture of reality that the reconstruction of Gaza is an important subject, but the most timely issue is to keep and protect the ceasefire and not to allow a bloodthirsty leadership in Palestine proper slash Israel from resumption of the bombing and killing and ethnic cleansing, which is really the plan of the state of Israel. And that will endanger the stability and peace in the region. It will even continue to endanger the American interests, reputation, and credibility around the world. Where we are now is there should be more efforts by the Arab governments. We saw one leader who came to the White House, and we saw now a reluctant president of Egypt, even from coming to the US. I cannot second guess his decision, but I believe more pressure on the United States should bear to continue to maintain the ceasefire and not to allow the continuation of the genocide against the Palestinian people. And the role of the United Nations, before it talks about rebuilding and reconstruction of Gaza, is to prevent Israel and the United States from making a mockery of international law and international order by allowing the resumption of the genocide in the afternoon of Saturday or Sunday, God forbid. Thirdly, it is important for the Muslim world, who the issue of Palestine has been central to its conscience, moral conscience, religious affinity, and also solidarity. This is the time for action. And the Arab world, who has been noted to be caring about the issue of Palestine, is also to take a serious and constructive action to put the necessary pressure on the United States government to stop green lighting Israel to freely go and redestroy Gaza again. And thirdly, and lastly, it is important for the international community to retake the initiative by putting pressure on the United States and not becoming a primary, direct or indirect complicit in the genocide that may restart this weekend. As far as the reconstruction, and this is my final point, definitely the reconstruction of Gaza is needed. The Palestinians have paid the ultimate price, and the world owes it a debt, not only to rebuild Gaza and put pressure on the United States and Israel to pay, reparation, but also to hold the Israeli leaders criminally in the International Court of Justice, the International Criminal Court, and not be subjected to the threats of the United States and the sanctions through executive order by the President of the United States. The United States, where I am a resident and a citizen of, should not be allowed to make a mockery of international law. The Israeli leaders have to be held criminally, including American leaders who financed, supplied Israel with the necessary tools to create mayhem and create this tragedy and destruction in Palestine. And last thing I would say, it is important for young people around the world, for civil society, to celebrate the progress they made. And individual voices, whether on social media, whether on student campuses, whether in academia, whether in Hollywood, whether in churches, in synagogues. You are the moral compass of the world today. Do not let your governments continue to set the tone for you. You have, without having the political power, you have shown the world that the issue of Palestine is central to all of us, And our governments, one day or another, they will heed the call and they will reconsider their position and help liberate the Palestinian people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nihad, for these touching words about what's happening in Palestine, especially focusing on the ceasefire. And since all of our speakers have finished their inputs, now just as Mr. Nihad was talking about, we raised the issue of the ceasefire itself. So can we just focus on the story of the ceasefire, and we can ask all our friends today about how the ceasefire can be maintained, especially after Trump's threats and after Israel declared that they are going to adopt this Trump's plan. So how do you think this ceasefire can be maintained? Or what can we do for this? Yeah, anyone who wants to just give his own insight.
I'm happy to say something.
Ambassador Maluf, I think. Sorry,
It's okay.
Mandy. So,
It's fine.
Ambassador Maluf.
Okay, ladies
And then
first. Please go ahead.
Okay, so I cannot say I cannot reject this. So we move to Dr. Mandy, please.
أهلا وسهلا.
I like Alan.
I mean, it just, I think the problem is that the world didn't manage to stop it, to get a ceasefire in the first place. And what did we see? We saw Western states in particular fall behind the United States and Israel. I just hope that Western states are now more willing to put pressure on Israel regarding this, to keep the ceasefire. But I am not optimistic. I don't think that Western states, and particularly EU member states, are going to do this. I think that that's why I have put my hopes with other states joining the group, the Hague group. I think that that's the one hope that we have, that states can combine together to pressure the UN, to pressure the United States, to isolate the United States and Israel on this. And I feel that that's one of the main issues that I would like to see, is more states committing to the Hague group, because their safety in numbers and the collective power is better than individual power.
Okay. Thank you, Mandy. And Ambassador Maluf, please have the floor.
Yes, Shukla, thank you. I personally think that we need to go even beyond the ceasefire and go to final peace in order to be sure that we are going for the reconstruction. In order to reach that, we have to put pressure on the United States. Beside the fact that different countries, United Nations, Arab Summit, and other than that, I have two ideas that I think could put pressure on the United States. First of all, Saudi Arabia. President Trump works very hard he tried in his first term to achieve the Abraham Accords, and with 4 Arab countries, it's still holding. Now he is working on Saudi Arabia very hardly. Even before him, President Biden, after he changed everything from in the policies of President Trump, he kept the Abraham Accords, and he tried to work on Saudi Arabia, to include Saudi Arabia with Israel, to have to normalize relations. Saudi Arabia has been reluctant. In the beginning, it said that they want to see a Palestinian state before they normalize the relation with Israel. Then they tempered a little bit their position, and they said we want to see a path for a Palestinian state. But now, after Trump's declaration and his ethnic cleansing ideas, the Saudis went back to the previous idea, and they are harder than before, and they say we want to see a Palestinian state take place. The other thing that Saudi Arabia can do, the other thing that they can do is that Prince Mohammed bin Salman has promised that he will invest $600 billion in the United States. And Trump was extremely happy, and he was boasting about that. And he said he will visit Saudi Arabia in the first 100 days of his now second term, and he will try to increase this investment to $1 trillion. So now Saudi Arabia has a strong hand to it. The other thing that I think could happen is, and I don't know if I am allowed to talk like that, but I look at the interest of the Palestinian people. What is more important, the Palestinian people or the leaders of Hamas? If the leaders of Hamas relinquish their leadership and decide to leave the Gaza Strip, then we can tell Trump that you have achieved a victory. That's all he wants. Whatever he says, he wants a victory. He wants to boast about something. Probably, maybe in this case, Trump will tell Netanyahu that we have finished with Hamas now, and then you have to stop the war, like he pressured him for the ceasefire on the 19th of January. I think he can pressure him to stop the war if Hamas would leave the Gaza Strip. This is the two ideas that I have to mention. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Malouf. And is there anybody else wants to add something to this point? Somebody's raising that, Maria?
Yes, that's me.
Yeah, go ahead, Maria. Go ahead.
Yeah. As Mandy, I'm not very optimistic. I am a Spanish citizen, and as you know, our government has been very keen on Palestinian self-determination, but only very recently, to be honest with you. And I think, Nihat, you have a very important point, protecting the ceasefire, right? As we see, there's a looming deadline this weekend, and it's very close. As things stand, not all these countries that even have spoken, European Union countries that have spoken on behalf or favorably towards Palestinian self-determination, they have not moved to be integrants of the Hague Group, which is an extremely important initiative and a good step forward. But so that is an indication. And I think probably the indication is Europe is paralyzed. Europe is paralyzed at many fronts with the new presidency in the United States and the manners and the bullying, international bullying that it's happening right now. And I think also there's a paralysis as well, because the Gulf states have not taken the step to move forward for the past, 16 months now of conflict. Saudi Arabia has an important role to play. The Gulf countries have an important role to play. Qatar has been playing an important role, but they need to step up as well. And I think it would be very symbolic if Saudi Arabia would step up before the deadline and putting a stop. Probably the rejection of or the news about Sisi not going to the United States have a little bit to do with the uneasiness with which the news about Trump's Riviera and owning Gaza have sit on countries in the Gulf. But I think, and this is a personal opinion, it would be very symbolic that Gulf countries, as they did in the past, step up for Palestine. And I think probably this is a way to start a different tide than the one that we have. Otherwise, I'm not very optimistic. We can preserve this ceasefire or guarantee its guarantee what the ceasefire should be standing for. Because again, we have a ceasefire, but it's a fairly incomplete ceasefire. The terms of the agreement have not been met. We all know how much aid has not been able to enter into Gaza, etc. I don't want to get into there, but we know it's a very partial, it's a ceasefire that hasn't really upheld to what it should be. So there are reasons why the Hamas, in this case, one of the parties in conflict, is actually saying this is not tenable. So without discussing the merits, but in this case, again, I hope one country has to make a stand. I think the Gulf has an important role to play here, and it would be really important that they stand up at this particular point. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria. And since we all talked about the ceasefire, but and what can the Arab countries, Muslim countries, and European countries, but we did not mention, what do you think? Do you think that the UN role to just try to maintain this, to push to try to keep this ceasefire on all the time, do you think that UN doesn't have this power to do so?
I'm going
Go
to
ahead, Mandy.
jump in and with a pessimistic message. I mean, the problem with the United Nations is that the ultimate decision-making body is the Security Council, and the Security Council is paralyzed by the UN, by the U.S. Veto. If you read the very eloquent memoirs of Kofi Annan, who was the Secretary General between 1997 and 2006, he said that on the one hand, that the issue of Palestine haunts virtually every UN hallway and every UN conference room. And then he points to the Security Council and saying it's paralyzed on the longest lasting and probably most important issue on its agenda, and it's because of the United States. We know that the U.S. has vetoed more than of the 80 vetoes that it's issued since the 1960s. More than 50 of those have been with respect to Israel, either Israel's occupation of Palestine or Israel's occupation of Lebanon. And therefore, the UN plays a very backroom role with regards to this. But I also want to mention two other aspects as well of the current moment. The first has to do with the Abraham Accords. I wish I could be as optimistic as Ambassador Malouf, but I'm not. If the Abraham Accords persisted throughout the 15 months of the genocide in Gaza, with no move by any of the Arab nations who belong to the Abraham Accords to end their diplomatic relations with Israel or to end their trade and investment relationships with Israel, I frankly can't hope for very much coming from them, perhaps aside from Saudi Arabia. They've, by maintaining the Abraham Accords throughout the genocide, I think they've proven their own irrelevance. And the other point I'll make is, and I say this as a Canadian, and knowing how obsessed Canada has been over the last 3 weeks with respect to its trading relationships with its most important trading partner, the United States, virtually every single Western ally of the United States is now in the position of having to confront extreme blows to its economy. Mexico, Canada, and the European Union. I'm afraid what this is going to mean is that the issue of wanting to dissent from or defer from U.S. policy towards Israel and Palestine is going to drop on the agenda as these countries scramble to try to protect their own self-interests. So I'm, as much as I would wish otherwise, I fear the Palestinians are virtually standing by themselves at this moment. We have to ensure, as many speakers have said, that we try to enlarge the area of protection, particularly by encouraging more countries to join something like the Hague Group. But right now, we're in a moment of desperation, and I don't see us emerging from this dark moment for at least some time to come.
Yes, unfortunately, that's what's going on. I mean, it seems that everybody had the same view and this pessimistic view of maintaining the ceasefire, but we hope that it will going to be on all the time. Now we have this, everybody has participated in this points. Now we have 1 minute for each speaker to provide the final words and conclusion messages. So who wants to start? Mandy?
I can but just agree with what Michael said. I'm not optimistic that either any Gulf states or any Western states will stand up for Palestinian rights and against the United States. My only hope is with these states from the Global South that have come together in the Hague Group. They have shown a lot of courage by doing so. They are in the firing line from President Trump's wrath which no doubt will be inflicted on them. And it's about time that other states stood up for the rights of sovereignty, national self-determination, and protect the UN, because the UN is virtually going to be on its last legs. I keep reading back into what happened in the 1930s with the collapse of the League of Nations, and we really see a similar situation there. So my final word would be to our elites in all of our countries is to join the Hague Group and stand up to President Trump. Otherwise, we're heading into an abyss that will be difficult to get out of.
Thank you very much, Mandy. Ambassador Malu, final words.
Yeah, I'm not that optimistic. I didn't want to give the impression that I was optimistic. And to comment on the Abraham Accords, I was not saying that the Abraham Accords were something good. What I meant was that the United States, Trump is eager to include Saudi Arabia in the Abraham Accord for the sake of Israel. But Saudi Arabia has this strong hand in its hand. It can say, no, I don't want, unless you do this or you do that with the Palestinians, unless you stop talking about removing the Palestinians from Gaza. I think it's a strong hand with the Saudis that they can use against them. It doesn't mean that it will succeed, but I think it might be something that can influence Trump. And I agree fully with when I heard that this Abraham Accord, the 4 countries, they can do anything since they accepted, they saw all the killing, everything that happened to the Palestinians, and not a single movement to stop at least the diplomatic relations with Israel, never. So that's why I don't think they have a lot of leverage, but I think Saudi Arabia has leverage by holding tight at not accepting to move ahead with the Abraham Accords in order to force Trump, probably nothing is sure, of course, but at least maybe he can say that he had done something if Saudi Arabia will hold on this. Yeah, that's all I had to say. And thank you again.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you very much. And finally, we can have one optimistic point. And now, Eric Porso. Eric, sorry for keeping you waiting that much, but we need a final word from you.
I would like to say, thank God we have social media. Thank God we have social media. For the past year, we watched a genocide live streamed to us, a modern day Holocaust. And if they do move all the Palestinians off their land, we're going to be watching a modern day trail of tears. Social media has given us the power to educate us, but also to do stuff like this right here. It's given us an influence. It has given us an influence to spread the word so that every single street corner around the world is filled with protests for the right cause, to counter mainstream media's false narratives. And thank God we have social media. I wish we had this 20 years ago. I think that during the Iraq war and everything like that, the truth would have come out. We wouldn't even be in this damn situation that we are in right now. So thank God for social media. It is a power in itself, and we're learning to use it better and better. Thank you again for having me.
Thank you, Eric, for being with us and for the second optimistic point. And now we need a final word from Mr. Nihad Awad from CARE. Mr. Nihad.
I am optimistic. I'm optimistic.
Oh, finally. Thank you very much.
Of course, I take a page from our people, the struggle of the Palestinian people who have inspired the world, despite being physically the weakest, but morally they have shown that they are the strongest. They have inspired people and societies around the world, and that is a page that we should all take. We should not put our hopes in the bullies. In psychology, bullies only respect power. We've seen it when President Trump exercised this bullying attitude on Mexico, Canada, and others. And he only retracted when they pushed back. So I hope that the Arab world, the neighboring countries, will realize that if they don't have inherent power in their governments, they should take a page from the Palestinian people and their own people, that Israel cannot continue to do what it's doing now without their silence. And their silence has been the license for Israel to continue with that. And finally, I would say I have a hope in so many people around the world, like the people we have here on the call, and the millions of people who have been speaking truth to power. They have been speaking loudly at the expense of their liberties, their safety, their prospect careers. I'm talking about students. Uh, these people give us hope. And the Palestinians, like the people of South Africa, they don't give up. They have not given up, and they will be victorious one day.
We hope so. Thank you very much, Mr. Nadal, for being with us. And the final word from Professor Michael Link. Professor Michael.
I'm going to add my voice to saying I'm optimistic. I'm pessimistic in the short run. I'm optimistic in the long run. It goes with that saying from a very famous Italian politician who said, "Pessimism of the intellect, optimism of the soul." I'm optimistic because the Palestinians have such resilience. I'm optimistic because the Palestinians have international law and UN resolutions on their side. I'm optimistic because the Palestinians have, by and large, international opinion, and particularly the youth of the global north on their side as well. And if I can just make my pitch with respect to international law and UN resolutions, they have to be, and they should be, I think, our North Star. I'm not starry-eyed about international law. I recognize its flaws, and I recognize that the biggest hole in the heart of international law, particularly when it comes to the question of Palestine, is the lack of accountability. But I also know that international law is not meant for lawyers alone. It's meant for all of us. And its ability to be able to be a good, one of the most important campaign issues that we wind up having, to say to people that the forced displacement of Palestinians is illegal under international law, to say to people that Palestinians have a right recognized by the UN and the International Court of Justice of self-determination, and to be part of the community of nations. All of that is a powerful thing to be able to say to people, and to win their allegiance to this struggle for justice. So, and I also, in the end of the day, know that no human rights victory was ever achieved without optimism. In the short term or even the medium term, things may look dark, but in the long term, there will be sunlight and the rising of the sun again. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this optimistic view. And our final word from our final speaker, Maria Del Mario, final word.
I'm just going to second Michael and Nihat. I think there's optimism in the long run. The resilience of Palestinian people is a source of inspiration for activists and young and not so young people around the world. And this is something that prevails, as Michael has said. International law is not just for lawyers, and those rights are for people to be inspired. And I think the last 16 months have shown how people, as you said, as Nihat said, are willing to give away their freedoms and to fight for what is right, what is morally right, and what they think is right. So that's where the hope lies, and that's where hope lies in the long run, in the mid long run. And my hope would be also that as a way to preserve this ceasefire, populations start demonstrating this weekend and organize a demonstration for peace like they have organized around. It is not easy to demonstrate, we know that as well, but again, people have prevailed and continue to demonstrate around the world, actually. The show of solidarity has been really important. And I think today we have a lot of really interesting ideas. There's a lot of ideas that can help us, and I speak as civil society, as a member of a civil society organization, put the voice out in terms of what are potential solutions for states to join and for people and citizens of states to ask their governments to step up in this case. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria, very much. And at the end of this webinar, I would like to thank each and every one of you for taking part in this webinar today and for your precious inputs. And inshallah, and hopefully everything is going to be optimistic at the end of the day. And thank you for joining us and wish you all the best. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.